Good morning everyone and welcome to the Ballarat Tech School. My name's Damon and I'd just like to welcome all of our students here from the various schools that we've got, and also all of our guests that are live streaming with us through Melbourne International Games Week. We're very privileged to have this opportunity here in Ballarat. This is the 14th gig that has been running over 15 years. We've got a fantastic panel to hear from this morning and some fantastic activities for those students that are here on site today as well. I'm going to hand over to Councillor Coates from the City of Ballarat to formally introduce and open the event. So, welcome, Councillor.
Thank you. Thanks, great to be here. And as mentioned, my name is Belinda Coates. I'm a councillor here in the City of Ballarat, and it's great to be here for this terrific event. And it's nice to be here in person too, isn't it? So as well as having it live streamed, there's nothing like being face to face when you have the opportunity to. Can I begin by acknowledging country, acknowledging that we're here on Wadawurrung country. City of Ballarat sits on both Wadawurrung and Dja Dja Wurrung country, and I pay respect to elders past and present, and all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, and acknowledge the long and enduring connection to country, land and waterways, and the tens of thousands of years that First Nations peoples have looked after the country that we're lucky enough to be living, working and studying on here. So you've got a great morning coming up. Thanks to all of the organisers here, and thanks to our MC for this morning, Mr. Adrian Borg, STEM educator for Ballarat Tech School, and the guest speakers. So Alexander Swords, games writer and narrative designer from Melbourne. Taya Godson, independent games artistry designer from Sydney, who I believe has a local connection to our creative Ballarat team. Who else do we have? And Luke Bellamy, games music composer from Wollongong. Welcome to Ballarat. Nice to have you here. And I'd also like to acknowledge those supporters of this event, including the Ballarat Tech School, of course. That's where we are right now. Federation University Australia, Highlands Len, who've been closely involved, as well as industry partners, so importantly Creative Victoria and IBM PTech, plus IT. So I'd like to welcome all the students as well. Thanks for coming along. City of Ballarat's been supporting this event since 2008, would you believe? And maybe that's almost not long after some of you were born. So the gaming industry's really evolved a lot in that amount of time, hasn't it? Especially the last 10 and 5 years, it's moving so rapidly. And what's really exciting is the breadth of opportunities and possible careers that are there. So across IT, all sorts of tech wizardry that's possible, and also across all of the tech industries as well. And I forgot to mention, in terms of the panel, I don't have on my notes, but Jay Rankin is here, so it's great to have a local here as well. Jay is a local artist and will be sharing some knowledge about, and I've forgotten the name of the brush. What's it called again? Tilt brush. Already I asked 2 times and then I forgot it. Tilt brush. So that sounds really exciting. So City of Ballarat's really proud to be supporting this event again. So as I mentioned, I'll just introduce the panellists in a little bit more detail. So actually I'll start with Jay. So Jay, as I mentioned, is a local artist here in Ballarat and creative, and he's going to be showing you some wizardry associated with tilt brush. So I'm just getting my head around it, so I think you put on the 3D glasses and you can paint and sort of see it as you're painting, which is really incredible. So welcome to the panel. Alexander Swords from Melbourne, who has 20 years experience working with stories, creators and their audiences. So Alexander's currently sharing this experience as a writer and narrative designer, which is terrific. So having that element included here as well. Taya Godson from Sydney. So as a self-taught 3D designer, I can hardly get my head around that, how you teach yourself how to do something as what seems as complicated as that. It's very, very impressive. Game developer and tech artist. She's been obsessed with imagining dream worlds since she was a kid and began bringing them to life in Blender over 8 years ago. So pretty impressive. Looking forward to hearing from you. Luke Bellamy, a composition major from Wollongong, so bringing the music element into gaming. From Wollongong, who works in the film and video game industry as well as the performance industry as a national beatbox champion. That's an impressive kind of CV, isn't it? And one of the things I've been really fascinated about with gaming is the way it's actually almost overtaking the movie industry in terms of the opportunities and even the money involved. I guess the money being made in gaming, it's incredibly impressive. So look, just in rounding that off, before you get onto the panel, really just highlighting that City of Ballarat is a creative city, and we're really strong on promoting all things in the creative industry. We've got a couple of our staff with us here today, Kelly and Peter as well, and we're just really fortunate to be involved in helping develop pathways for students, really, to hopefully contribute back to the city in the creative industries, but possibly, as you'll hear from all of the speakers on the panel, take those skills far and wide out onto the national stage or international stage. The opportunities are just really endless, I think. So I really encourage you to make the most of today. Ask lots of questions. So hopefully you've been jotting them down and thinking about, what kind of angle you're most interested in. So today could be the first step in your involvement in getting a step towards a career in this industry. So it's fantastic to see over 100 local regional students participating in the Games Expo. As you know, it's being live streamed as well, so that's great for others to have the opportunity to hear from all of the exciting panelists today. So look, the Get Into Games Expo is hopefully a great gateway for you to learn more, get inspired, ask lots of questions, and maybe take a step towards one of the careers as the panelists here today have. So please give them a big round of applause, and I'll hand back to the MC.
Thank you very much, Councillor. All right, panel. I'm excited. I'm excited to hear from you. I hope the audience is as well. Are we feeling good? Are we feeling nervous?
Oh, good. Let's go.
Good. All right. Let's get into it. So, what we've got to sort of kick off, to sort of get a bit of characterisation, loosen up the shoulders, the vocal cords, loosen up the feeling a bit. We've got a few rapid fire questions. So, short answer. We'll try to get through as many of these as we can. That's it. Limber up, stretch, get yourself going. All right. So, I'll go through each of you. We'll start with Luke for this first series. Fortnite or PUBG?
I have to go PUBG.
PUBG, nice. Taya?
I contractually have to say Fortnite. I know someone that works on it, so I don't feel like it's being live streamed. I feel like I'm going to get in trouble.
Alexander?
Neither. I'm too busy playing Overwatch.
Well, I like that one. And?
Sorry, no comment.
No. That's all good. All right, next up, Dota or League of Legends?
Probably League of Legends because of the Arcane series, which is the
I've heard it's good.
Come on.
Yeah, I've heard that's really good.
Not Dota.
Dota all the way.
I watch the International every year.
Yeah, it's really
We
good.
go for OG.
Neither. I'm too busy playing story games.
Sorry, it's a
And
pass.
It's all good.
So we got 3 Dotas, 1 League of Legends.
Yeah.
You're
So,
just framing us.
Yes.
Okay, fair enough.
this was more of a general preference, not a specific gaming question. Do you have a general preference for 2D games or 3D games?
Not really. I feel like they both contribute to narrative in different lenses, I suppose. They're
That's
both good.
Good answer.
I'm going to say 2D, just because I play a whole lot of Metroidvanias. I play a lot of Hollow Knight, I play a lot of Dead Cells, and they're just best in 2D.
Yep. No, I can appreciate that too.
It's 3D for me because there's extra immersion that you can get from being a first-person view.
Classic 2D.
Classic 2D.
Metal Slug.
Good game. Very good game. Is anyone in the audience born after 2000 know what Metal Slug is? Yeah. Only a couple of people. It's a good game. Look it up. It's a good game. Okay, so if we have to play a 3D game, do we prefer realistic or low poly models?
Oh, that's a really tough question. They're both so good. Probably low poly because I feel like the creative freedom's probably a bit more.
Yeah, appreciate that. So you do the
Yeah,
same?
I think I'm going to say the same thing. There's a whole bunch of different styles of games to be in, so you can have, I think, a lot more freedom in low poly, and it doesn't always have to have that kind of like faceted look.
Yeah, absolutely. Alex?
Yeah, same. Low poly is
Low
my
poly.
freedom.
Jay?
Yep, low poly and concept. I think concepts,
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, you do. I think you're right in saying that you get a lot of the artist's vision can come through a bit more when you're not
Yeah.
restricted by trying to be real.
Mm.
Okay, now the opposite side of the coin. If you're playing a 2D game, do we prefer vector art or pixel art?
I think Pixel because a bit of nostalgia coming from me,
Yeah.
Pokemon and such. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think with a lot of, I guess, new stuff that's being developed in a lot of games, you get pixel art with a ton of effects over the top, and it looks really cool. And so you can kind of bring in that kind of like 3D elements into the 2D pixel art. Yeah, it's really exciting.
Absolutely.
I like that.
Yeah, I have trouble reading pixel art games. Like it all becomes a bit of a mess for me. So anything else is good. But I'm really loving the painterly styles that are now kind of coming out.
Mhm.
What'd you
games
call
as
it?
well.
Painterly?
Painterly styles. It's like they look like
It's like-
line drawings or watercolors.
It's like when you
or
can see the
Yeah.
brush
paintings.
strokes.
Ah, yeah.
in-
Yeah,
in
beautiful
some art,
work.
yeah.
Disco Elysium has like a very oil painting kind of look
Yep.
to it, which is great.
And Jay?
definitely pixel.
Definitely pixel. Yeah, retro all the
Yeah,
way.
yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, terminology for games. Do you prefer the term boomer shooter or dad games?
I haven't heard either of these
do
before.
people
Like,
say
I
that?
feel like you just made that
People
up.
say that.
Yeah.
Is it you? Is it just you
It's
that
just-
says
it's
it?
just
Me
you,
and this
isn't
other
it?
guy I know, yeah.
Is it your dad?
Yeah, I mean, Boobashoon is pretty quick off the tongue. It's pretty.
It rolls off the tongue,
Yeah,
yeah?
it does. Pretty catchy.
I like dad games. It feels friendly.
There's a genre of post-dad game which you can look into as well.
I like that.
Yeah, I prefer dad games.
Yeah.
Because it also sounds really daggy, right?
Yeah, it does, yeah.
Yeah.
It feels like, saying it feels like you're describing a pair of like zip-off pants.
Boomer shooter feels like they're trying too hard.
Yeah.
Dad shooter's like, I'm just owning that I'm now
I'm
fat
just
and
a
I'm
dad,
playing
yeah.
games. So.
Yeah.
Jay?
I am a dad, so I have to go with the dad game.
In case anyone's wondering, dad games are things like Farming Simulator or Factorio or yeah.
Probably not.
What's your comment there?
Wow.
All right, PC or console?
Oh, I mean, I love Minecraft on PC.
Oh, yeah.
It's really good. I've always played console since I was a little kid, so I'm very quick to pick up a console, but I will get a PC one day.
Tab?
I'm really stuck between the two because I don't really enjoy a game unless I can mod it into Oblivion.
Yeah.
And so I think I would have to say PC, even though after working all day on my computer, I just want to sit down and just sit in bed with a Switch.
Yeah, it's PC for me. I've always had a PC as well, and I feel like there's depths to the mechanics you can get from a keyboard and a mouse that you can't have with a controller.
Absolutely.
I think console.
Yeah.
Yeah. Retro console. So.
Yeah, I'm surprised there wasn't more polarization in the group. Usually that's a really
Yeah.
polarizing question. All right, last of our rapid fire questions. Unity or Unreal Engine?
Okay, controversial. I like Unity because I generally I'm a little bit more versed in that for musical implementation and things. So
I don't think I could choose on this one. I've worked in both. They're both terrible in their own ways. They're fun, I can promise you. But they do, yeah, I think they're probably equal for me.
Cool. Alex?
Neither of them. I don't have to go anywhere near an engine to do my work. I have middleware tools that do everything that I need, and then an amazing programmer does some wizardry that gets it into the game.
Well, I've got an interesting question following up for you later on that one. We'll come back to that, Jay.
I've used Unity, I haven't used Unreal. So.
Yep, so you man?
Yeah.
No worries. All right, rapid fire questions off. Do we have any early questions from the audience?
Do you have any like specific genres that you specialize in, or is it just like general?
I think that's
So I'll just repeat that question for the live stream. So that was a question, do you have any specific genres? And was it for a particular audience member? Oh, sorry, particular panelist?
No, just
No?
All of us.
So for all panelists,
Absolutely.
do you have any particular genres that you work in?
I'm currently working on like a musical tool for D&D, so tabletop for me all the way.
That's cool.
I tend to end up making a lot of really story-driven games, but a lot of my work is kind of in the environments of games. So I guess whatever project my team is working on. But it is really fun to do story-driven games because you can put all those little bits in the background that tell a bit of the story of their own. So if people who are playing are watching really closely, that can be really fun to put in as well.
Yeah, because everyone who works on a story-driven game is a storyteller. It doesn't matter if you're the artist or the programmer or the producer, you're all storytellers. Yeah, for me it's weird. At the moment, down one end it's like a surreal kind of fantasy game, and then down the other end it's this kind of realistic kind of coming-of-age drama where you can just decide not to wash for 3 days and have an entire town, decide that you're a stinky person they're not worth talking to. But both of it I love, and that's why I love about games. It's such a wide gamut that I can do work in.
I'm not sure once I would start making a game, maybe. I'm not sure what gender I would like. I suppose artistically what I do is more graphic driven. So, yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Good question.
Yeah.
Anything else from the audience? Yes.
What game, film, or series got you into this career?
Alright, so again, I'll just repeat that. So for all panelists, what game, film, or movie series got you into your career?
Probably Minecraft for me. I think I started the earliest in Minecraft. Obviously, I got to build little houses and I got to explore. I still play Minecraft constantly. But I also got into it from making texture packs. So once I realized that you can actually get into the files and break them apart and put your own stuff in, like that was what was really exciting. And so I ended up modding Minecraft. Making texture packs, making my own blocks. And that was, I think once you get into modding Minecraft, you can kind of start making your own game, basically, with a really good basis that you already know how to play. So.
Yeah, my first game was Myst at YST, for those who aren't old enough to know it. I had it on a CD-ROM, played it on my 386 PC. And because that was the first time like a real kind of rendered 3D environment. I mean, it was basically a slideshow. At the time, you kind of had to just click a button and kind of move forward. It was the first time, first-person perspective in a kind of realistic environment. But then skip forward to, because then I did film and television for a really long time, which was really cool. But then I played Borderlands 2, and there's so much good characterization and stuff about relationships in that game. But even though it's a shooter-looter, and it's very action and very violent, it does have a bit of a heart to it. So that's when I decided games were for me.
I think Lord of the Rings that got me into, I think, just video games, film, and music in general, because I mean the soundtrack is pretty much bulletproof, and so I obsessed over it for a while, and eventually did a music degree and found out that I could make my own. Does anyone know the Choose Your Own Adventure books? I was obsessed with them as a kid as well, and so Twine kind of led me down that road of I can make music and I can also create a Choose Your Own Adventure game, and I can world build and create my own world. So
I never knew how to read the Choose Your Own Adventure books. I would just read them front to back, and it wouldn't make any sense. Turn to I didn't even see the turn to page 54. I would just blast right there.
That's so funny. Yeah, so we'll be Lord of the Rings.
Film, I'll pick, when I was 15, going to Huntingdale Tech in Melbourne, it was 1985, and it was a documentary on New York graffiti, Star Wars.
Wow, yeah, really cool. A blast. All right. I'm going to go through one of my pre-prepared questions because it's something you said before, Alex, about not needing to do any of the programming. So a little bit of trivia. Does everyone know the game Portal? Show of hands. Yeah, quite a lot of people know Portal. All right. So during the development of Portal, the writers were trained to do some basic game programming because writers understood comedic timing better than the programmers and could therefore program their dialogue better. How important do you think it is to know a little bit of game engine programming, even as a non-programming creative?
Very, very important, I think. And I don't think you need to do that much. Like Twine is a fairly open source tool, for example, and the code's not so complex, and just the idea that I can implement music into it and show kind of a non-linear story with some music of my own music probably gives you that edge, I think, in the video game industry to represent your ideas and show that you can go that extra initiative to show that you're willing to learn and
I have a kind of interesting answer to this one because Unreal Engine has really gotten to a place where you don't need to know how to program to make a game at all. You can make a fully fledged game, you know, infinitely complex without having to write any code, which is really exciting. They've developed that in the last couple of years. And yeah, in my team, I work with a lot of illustrators and people who have never touched coding. Like, they just don't know what it is. And so, yeah, I mean, getting them into Unreal and getting them to work in the program is really easy because, yeah, they don't have to do any. But I think it's really important to know how a game engine works. And yeah, I guess instead of learning how to code, it's just kind of learning how to implement your work in the game engine.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's super important though. It gives you so much more creativity and flexibility, especially if you can't communicate very well between a programmer and an artist, and they can't quite implement what you're trying to say to them. Yeah.
Good answer. Thank you, Sam. Alex?
Yeah, so I think it's important for your autonomy. If you want to do the kind of work where you feel direct access to the engine is important, then it is definitely important. And Teo brings up a good point. It is also good to know how that stuff kind of works. But when I say I have never needed to go into an engine, it doesn't mean that I don't do code. But usually what happens is each project will have its own kind of code. It'll be very simple things. It'll be just something like, you know, I put in a square bracket, you know, smiley emoji square bracket, to let the engine know that this character should smile when they deliver this bit of dialogue. So it's much simplified. It's certainly not the code that is usually spoken about when we're talking about an engine. There's lots of stuff you can do with that, but to a certain degree I think it's more important to understand just the logic of how engines work. And so if you're working in something like Twine, or if you're doing this code, you know, in amongst the kind of writing that you do, making sure you understand how the engine is going to interpret that is really, really important. Least of which, because you're probably going to talk to the programmer who's going to ask questions like that as well.
Yeah, with any software, I think it's important to just understand the basic fundamentals of it, especially when you're communicating with other people, trying to get something done.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Do we have any questions from the audience?
How does the process to designing sound design begin?
So it's particularly for Luke? Yep.
Okay.
So that was a question for you, Luke. How is the process of designing some sounds begin?
With me, began with beatboxing. Just any kind of sound, or even recording a train, or and then putting that into your session, and then just stretching it out. The process of it starts with capturing it, I suppose, and then putting it into a digital space, and everything from there is completely subjective, and that's why sound design, I think, is so fun, because there's no rules. Sound design can be throat singing, could be beatboxing, could be hitting a guitar in a certain way that isn't considered common practice, or recording a train sound that sounds funky and stretching that out. So, yeah.
Thank you very much for that question, and thanks for the
Thank
answer,
you.
Luke. Just to follow on from that, would you agree that the human mouth is a very underutilized tool for starting your sound creation for a video game?
Oh yeah, 100%. I think there's a lot of instances where, as I've been creating a game or looking for like Foley. Are you aware with Foley? It's like people record sounds of like footsteps or like horse sounds, and I use beatboxing a lot in Foley because it's easy to do and imitate. So yeah, the voice again is the oldest instrument in the world, and its ability to like replicate things and sounds is quite extensive, and it's really fun. And you can get another thing as well that I find very fascinating is if you beatbox, everyone in the room recognizes that it is coming from a human source. There's something that happens. I know when I've performed on stage, there's technological music, and there's computer generated music, and as soon as someone beatbox like a techno song, people know it's not a techno song straight away. They hear it and they can recognize that is, and it draws attention, I think, and it's interesting, definitely interesting to use. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Do we have another question from the audience?
Do you believe there's one part of a game design that's more important than the other?
So is there one part of game design that's more important than others? Do you want to kick it off?
I don't think so. I think there's maybe some fields that you can specialize in. I think that might come down to if you want to specialize in a certain area. If you, yeah, so kind of like a style, or what kind of style you want to choose as well. I think it's completely subjective.
Yeah. I think there are so many genres of games that, depending on what you pick, you know, if you're making something like Fortnite, you're not going to have to spend as long writing your narrative structure because you're not going to have like a linear story for it to follow. Same with something like Minecraft, where it's kind of more player-driven content. But yeah, if you have a story game, you're probably not going to have to focus on getting in any multiplayer action, or you're not going to have to develop a lot of physics. Yeah, I think it really depends on what kind of game you want to develop.
I mean, it's a collaborative effort. Everything relies on everything else, and it's a bit of a house of cards. Like, if it all stays together, it's beautiful and amazing. But if you take one element out, it all falls apart. Even if one of those elements is actually quite tiny.
Yeah, you can have a visual game that looks amazing, but then the gameplay is terrible.
Yeah.
You've got to have all the aspects, you know, together.
Audio. Sometimes I've
Yeah.
played amazing games. The art is fantastic, and the audio is just out of the box nonsense.
I
So
think, yeah.
don't forget your audio. Get to know people like Luke. He's also very well networked.
I think as well, especially if you're on a team that's bigger than 3 people, you want a producer, like you want someone to organize your time, and you want someone to be able to bring all of your elements together, because as soon as you have 6 people, you've got 2 programmers and an artist and a couple of other people, being able to sync up with everyone's going to get really hard. And yeah, having a producer just to say, okay, you know, we're putting a lot of energy into programming, but not as much into narrative right now, and we need to fix that. You need someone with like an overview of everything. I think that's actually probably one of the more important parts, is having someone to oversee everything.
Excellent. Just want to lead on from that question. So you mentioned in your answer, Taya, that Fortnite is a game that doesn't have a lot of story, and in a certain sense we might think about story as being only the dialogue that's spoken by characters. But I'll just get a quick feel from the audience and from the panellists. Has anyone played or are reasonably familiar with Dark Souls and Elden Ring? Reasonably, yeah. So, so good, that's relevant to the question I want to ask the panellists. So in these games, we're seeing something that is very different to traditional storytelling, very different to movies and cinema, where the dialogue and the way that the world unfolds to the player is very much so less about direct conversations and more about, oh, why is this item in this location? Why is this corpse over here? Why are those monsters in this area that they really shouldn't be? And the player pieces together these things. Do you think that there are this style of storytelling that is somewhat unique to games? It may be the next big thing, or maybe something that you'd like to work on.
For sure, I think in Dark Souls and Elden Ring, the thing that stands out beyond other games to me, immediately the word I get is world building. I think like world building now, you were touching on how it's not directly dialogue driven, and a lot of it comes down to the initiative of the player to go out and explore the world and pick up all these different items and piece these like stories together that seem unrelated and go through a lot of pain and torture to get there, and trying to deal with the themes of hardship and things. It's like built into the fabric of the world building, I think, and that's something I do when I focus narrative as well. Is I feel like maybe there is this emphasis of leaning towards world building, and yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Luke.
Yeah, I think environmental storytelling is incredibly important. I mean, you mentioned Myst. Myst has a whole ton of it. Myst and its sequels lent really heavily into it, because you don't encounter really a single other human being or creature in that game. It's all solo, and so you mostly just have to read notes and piece together what happened to an entire civilization based on what you can see. And yeah, I mean that's been happening in games for decades already, and I just think it's going to get more important as we can put more detail into games. I think I think it's going to take off.
Thank you, Ted.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, basically the way we consider it is there's embedded story, which is what we traditionally think about in terms of like an authored story that a player goes through, and there's emergent kind of story. So even though something like Fortnite doesn't necessarily have a lot of embedded story in it, there is definitely narrative designers who are actually looking at that space and understanding from the player's perspective how that story unfolds in a more emergent kind of way. The only thing kind of holding us back at the moment is technology to have more emergent story driven by NPCs, and that's why at the moment we still have relatively empty worlds and all the storytelling is being done in the environment. But now that AI is going to be helping us develop NPCs and flesh out these worlds, we'll get more worlds which are the storytelling is actually going to be back into the hands of actual other characters who are able to do it. But that's just been a technological limitation at the moment. So it's exciting stuff.
Pass me on that one. It's gone over my head.
That's fair enough. I'll throw back out to the audience. Do we have any burning questions that we'd like to ask out there? I'll grab someone who hasn't asked one before.
I've got a two-part question. One quickly for Luke. Real keen that you're a beatboxer. Do you have a game that you've put some beatboxing into, and could you give the students a little bit of a demo of some beatboxing?
Yeah.
So I'll just quickly repeat that for the live stream. So that's does Luke have a game you've beatboxed on? Was that? Can you give us an example as well? Was that the next?
Yeah, a little demo, little sample.
So I haven't done one directly for a game, but I'm developing this musical software for D&D so that. Is anyone aware of Sirenscape?
Sirenscape, yeah. Sirenscape. Yeah.
With Sirenscape, you utilize sliders, and so I'm trying to do one where instead of utilizing sliders, it's just you move characters around relative to where you are on the map or in the certain chapter in the story. There's different bosses at the bottom that you can just move the character to, and then there'll be transition of music. And one of those characters is Durgar, which are these dark dwarves, and so I try and utilize a really guttural, low, like Mongolian throat singing inspired voice. And I've got that in there, so that's one thing I've done, but yeah, not released yet.
That's really cool.
And the demo, of course, I've got. Okay.
No pressure. I'm glad no one asks me to do writing on stage. That's for sure.
Okay. Okay. I haven't warmed up at all, so forgive me.
How is that coming out of your
Wow, thank you so much for that. That was really special.
Thank you.
I think Cult of the Lamb actually uses voice samples
Yes.
for
wow.
its music and sound effects.
It reminded me a lot of Cult of the Lamb.
Oh wow.
Which is, it's incredible. I think it won at the Actors last night, which is the Australian Game Developer Awards. I think it won a Sound Design Award, which was really incredible.
Cult of the Lamb is an Australian game.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they sit right next to me, and it's very intimidating.
Yeah. No, they're so cool. It was really lovely to meet them all last night. But yeah, really awesome game.
The York did a whole album. It was all voice.
Yeah. Yeah. Incredible.
She's cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Do we have any other questions from the audience?
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you have any games that you're working on, or any plans for projects?
So do you have any games you're working on or any planned projects?
Yeah, so I suppose as I said before, the that D&D implementation one, I'm still trying to get my head around Unity and the code, so probably going to try and outsource to someone who wants to help with that, because I mainly focus on implementation for the music and the narrative sense of it. But yeah, just a little app where if you're playing D&D and let's say the characters want to explore, for example, the Realm of the Frost Maiden, which is a heavily frozen wasteland experience. If you want to go explore the tundra, there'll be kind of music introduced and played, and some atmospheres, and so it's a pretty big musical project that I'm working on at the moment. But yeah.
Cool. My team's currently working on. So I work at Summerfall Studios, and so we're making a game called Stray Gods: The Adventure Musical, which is very musically centered as well. Actually, it's a story game, and you get to meet the Greek gods in their modern day forms. You can romance them, and every so often there's a Broadway musical. And
I feel like you're underselling it.
I know. No, so
the story is told through music, and you get to
is.
choose the story through choosing the lyrics, and then it
Yeah.
all happens as you're choosing it. So
Yeah.
you don't
So
jump out
yeah.
of the music to do
No,
it. You
partway through the
choose-
song, you'll
it's amazing.
have a choice wheel, and you can choose whichever lyrics you want. If you want to be a little angrier, if you want to try and get people on your side, and it'll change the tune of the song and the lyrics of the song, and then it'll change what happens in the game. And then throughout the game, your choices you've made within the songs and the tunes that you've chosen will show up at later points as well. So every time you play, you have a completely different experience. Which is really, really fun.
Sounds so cool.
I did
written by ex-Bioware dev David Gator.
David Gator,
who's one
who
of my
did
heroes.
Dragon Age.
Yeah, absolutely.
We got, if anyone watches Critical Role, we've got Laura Bailey as our lead, which is really exciting.
Yes. However many thousands of hours of music you had to
Oh,
into the game.
don't talk to
because
me
of it.
about how much audio is in that game. But yeah, I do all the environments for that, which is really cool because we're going for a bit of a comic book style. So that's presented a lot of challenges we can talk about at some point.
Yeah, there's two main projects that I'm working on at the moment. One is Totem Teller, which is kind of a surreal adventure through the nature of story and inspiration. And beyond that, it's a bit harder to talk about it without showing you. And the other one that I'm working on is called Anytown Garage Sale Monsters, and it's about a young teen that moves to a new town, which could be any town. We're just trying to work out who the hell they are and what does it mean to be in this new town. They've left all their friends behind, how to make new friends, while also kind of looking after the other relationships around them. So very much almost a drama, coming of age type stuff, but of course it's going to be hilarious because being a teen's funny.
I'm not doing a game, but I'm doing a mural next to this art gallery Ballarat for the city of Ballarat, start of November. So
that's cool.
Is that an augmented reality three-dimensional thing?
no comment.
No comment. Okay.
Secret.
You'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah. Exciting. All right, that sounds pretty cool. Anything else from the audience down here?
Just to pick up on something Alexander said, you mentioned you sit next to some intimidating developers.
Yes.
Can you just describe a little bit for us what the community the game work looks like and how some young people here might be able to find their way into some work experience in that space?
Yeah, sure. I mean, one thing I would love about the games industry is we just appreciate effort more. So we're less interested in people talking about it, and qualifications are important, but only in the sense of that's how you learn to do the thing. So if you want to get attention of game developers, then rock up with a game that you've made. And it doesn't need to be anything super amazing or fantastic. It could be a simple choose your own adventure in Twine. So it sounds like you're making one today, if you're going to be with Luke. We're just constantly talking about the cool stuff that we're doing with each other. I'm very lucky to be working in a co-working space called Acne X. So we have film and television people as well as games people kind of in that space. But there are also regular things like Games Week and so on where we all kind of get together. But the thing that I love about it is most of us are just incredibly nerdy. So we're not bragging about, other things that other people do in other industries necessarily, right? It's like you'll walk up to someone who's worked in BioWare or some of the biggest games on the planet, but they might crack out the Twine game that they made in the afternoon, as a present for their partner or something, to do it. So keep making games, and then turn up to the spaces where game developers are if and when you get an opportunity to. Obviously, spaces like this are really important. The challenge that you were given to meet new people includes us today. So I'll be sticking around for a while. We are human beings like you are. We're not scary people.
We're big nerds.
We're big
We're
nerds,
big
honestly. Like we're all
we play
basically
Minecraft.
we all the weirdos at school, I think.
Yeah.
So and the other good thing about games too is like there are so many different paths. So don't feel like you need to go from here into a game design degree and into games, right?
Yeah.
Whatever passion you have, you can probably bring it into games, right? So my storytelling goes across film and television and theatre as well. Obviously, Luke started with beatboxing and so on. What was your first adventure into art?
Minecraft.
Did you say something before that?
Oh, well, I mean, if we want to go
Production design at school.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
okay,
I
the school
did.
theatre production.
Yeah, I did set design every year in high school because I got to design a set and I got to make a little environment and now I just do that digitally. But following on
the tools are
Yeah.
getting better to actually capture all that. So
Yeah.
you don't need to know all the code anymore, right? There are so many different tools because there are so many different people like you with different interests who've gone, I want to do games, but engines are hard. And so, you know, they're starting to develop their own engines. And it feels like that's kind of how Tilt Brush and some of the stuff that you know about also came about, I think, because there are artists who are like, I just want to put on some goggles and work in paint in 3D.
Yeah.
And so they made that happen.
I wanted to follow on from what you said,
Please.
which is, yeah, I didn't do a game design degree. I started making stuff in Blender because it's free. It's completely free. You just download it, you start just making things. I just started doing that. They were really, really bad. I put them on Reddit, and I eventually just put enough on there and was chatting to people in the comments that some people were like, hey, let's try and make a game. That didn't go anywhere, but it meant that I sort of got to work with a team for a little bit, and I just kept making things, and I just put them on Twitter and Reddit and Behance, which is like a online like graphic design portfolio website. And eventually someone saw it and went, hey, did you want to do concept art for a real video game that we're making? And so I did that at the end of high school, and then they hired me. You don't have to go through a regular route. Just start making game adjacent things and put them online and join Discord groups and just talk to people, because so much of games is word of mouth. You know, you don't need a qualification.
And don't wait for it to be polished to show it either.
Yeah.
Like, the good thing about games too is like we work with what we call the iterative approach. So every version of something that you do, as long as there's one thing that you've improved, one good thing and one bit of progress, then that's a win, that's a success. And so the process then, if you're getting feedback from someone, is to actually see what the potential is in something. So we do something called grey boxing, and it's like, you know, the ugliest version of the game you could possibly have. But that might be because we're trying to get driving to feel good, or flying to feel good, or how the story system's going to work. And we're very used to looking at that and thinking about that in terms of potential as well. So it doesn't need to be complete. It doesn't even need to necessarily work very well. It just needs to have, you know, some kind of potential in it, and there's a good
Yeah.
chance that whoever you're talking to is going to be interested.
Like, you have an idea or a goal, and if you can see that in what you've made, great, show it to someone.
We've got, I think, just a couple of minutes left before we wrap up the live stream, so I might just throw one last question to our panelists. If you could talk to your 16-year-old self, knowing what you know now about the challenges of being a creative, what would you say?
As hard as it can be, sometimes it's definitely worth it, because we all experience writer's block, and we all get discouraged sometimes when sometimes things don't go to plan, but that constant passion to see it through always pays off in the end. It definitely does.
Yeah. I have a lot of trouble with finishing my projects. I start so many things and I just never get them done. But I think, look, my 16-year-old self was mean, so I don't know if I'd actually want to talk to her. But I think something that I thought of recently when I was trying to write a talk was, don't always try and make something that looks pretty. Like, I do a lot of visual stuff, and so I've always just been trying to make stuff that looks good when you should just be trying to make stuff. Because it's not always going to look good, but every time you make something, you're going to figure something out, and you're going to learn something else, and then eventually, yeah, you're going to make something that looks really cool. Yeah, I guess persevering, and yeah, just not really caring about what every single, like, not every single piece has to be polished or done or, you know, impeccable or perfect. Just getting it out there. Yeah, just getting it out. Any little idea you have.
For me, I would say have a healthy disrespect for rules.
Yeah.
Sorry, teachers. But I mean that in the sense of, like, particularly in writing, right? I got told so many ways that I have to do writing, or how stories kind of have to be. And part of the issue that I had moving from film and television in particular, writing for film and TV, into games, was there are so many rules that just don't work in games. And also games have, like, every project has a different structure, different format, different type of story, different characterization, so on and so forth. And so I'd encourage you by all means to take those rules on board, but don't think of them as restrictions, think of them as a starting point, and then expand your knowledge. Look at storytelling from other cultures, or just look at game playing in other cultures, particularly our First Nations people as well, have so much to teach us about better ways of telling stories and doing play. And then certainly, you know, looking at what other things are happening overseas as well, outside of the American market, because we do have very strong conventions about story and game making, but that's driven by the American market system, and obviously There are many other ways of telling stories and playing games.
It's a tricky question. I probably give myself a tip about when I do have a writer's block. When I'm not in a writer's block and my brain's just churning with ideas, I just write all the ideas on paper. So when I do have writer's block, I go back to those ideas, and then you can just pick stuff up, and it really helps.
I did that as well for a lot of my art. I have a little note on my phone of weird stuff, but then I look at it and I'm like, Baba Yaga house without legs, and I'm like, that's just a house.
I have an entire system to capture every single idea that I have, so I'm not even going to go into it.
I might just touch on something Taya said. So you were talking about trying to just make things, not necessarily things that look good.
Yeah.
I think when you're beginning your journey in any new skill, whether that's in Unreal Engine, Blender, telling stories with Twine, or making art, or whatever it is, there's always a gap between what you know looks good and what you like and what you can make. That skill gap is sometimes enough to put people off, and they say, well, I can't make something that I like yet, so I'm not going to try. But you've got to push through that. I think every panelist up here has just sort of reinforced that that's what they've done, and that's what is worth it. So through today, if there's something you want to do and you can't quite do it yet, just remember that you're on your journey. You will be able to make that thing happen, that thing that's in your head that you want to show the world, if you stick at it. And maybe you need to come at it from a different angle. Maybe you need to go and follow a different tutorial on YouTube before coming back to it. But you will, if you keep doing those things, you will gain those skills to be able to make whatever it is that you find special and unique and awesome.
Just quickly before we do wrap up, what you said brought back this graph that I've seen floating around on the internet, which is really, really good, and it's two variables. One of them is your artistic skill, or your writing skill, or your programming skill, whatever it is, your creative skill, and one of them is your ability to view the end result of that thing. And so they're not going to move in tandem, and so at times your view of your chosen hobby and how well you can see the quality of it, so like how well you can view art, is going to be so much higher than your ability to create it. And you're gonna look at everything you make and you're gonna go, this sucks, I suck. But that's just because you've gotten better at seeing it. And then at times, your skill is gonna far surpass how you can view your art. And so you're gonna be like, this is great, I'm incredible. But both of those go up at the same time. And so at a certain point, you can look back and go, oh my word, this stuff that I thought was incredible is actually garbage. Or, oh my word, I was so much better than I thought I was.
And games is complicated. If you get one thing working and one thing right, that's a win. Celebrate that win. Okay, it's own it. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
All right, I think that might be a good space to wrap up. So I'd like to thank all of our panelists, and if I can lead you all in, please give them a round of applause. And thank you for being present for our morning session, and to all of our live stream viewers online. I hope you've enjoyed the panel today. We'll set up to break for a few of our group sessions, and feel free to keep asking questions through the day as you see each of us around the building.
Please just come up to me, I will answer your questions.
Okay, thanks guys.
Thank you.
Yeah.